intermediate pelvic reduction, and then the simple vestigial pelvis that's still found in the modern forms. The other group of marine mammals that's known are the cetaceans, the whales and the dolphins. We actually have a dolphin skeleton here at the front of the auditorium. So dolphins also have characteristic streamlined marine body form. They have foreflippers, but they don't have hind limbs. You can see here in the skeleton the obvious flipper or forelimbs of the dolphin up here at the front of the body. There are no hind limbs in the skeleton, but hanging beneath the vertebral column at the spot where a hind limb would normally be, you can again see these two rudimentary bones, unattached, no legs coming out, but these represent what's left of a pelvis in this form of marine mammal. That kind of rudimentary pelvis suggests that dolphins and whales also evolved from four-legged land animals. If that's true, where are the transitional fossils that show those precursors? Well, for manatee and whale evolution, the spectacular fossils have also been found in the last 20 years. In this case, the key fossils are located in Pakistan and Egypt. 47-million-year-old skeletons have heads that look like whales, but still have four legs with the hind limbs as robust as the forelimbs. The Egyptian fossils from 36 million years again show skulls that are clearly whale-like. You can now see that the hind limb has been extensively reduced, very small, still has a pelvis and a femur and the lower leg bones, but it's detached from the vertebral column, could no longer support body weight. Again, a beautiful set of transitional fossils from a four-legged animal with the skull of a whale to partial hind limb reduction to the kind of tiny rudimentary pelvises that you see today in a modern dolphin or whale. Finally, large and complete mammalian fossils are rare, but an amazingly detailed fossil record exists for the process of pelvic reduction in sticklebacks. We introduced sticklebacks yesterday. I want to show you a short video that summarizes extensive paleontological studies of the fossil record of pelvic reduction that have been carried out by Mike Bell. So these are all based on studies of a fossil lake site in Nevada. At this site, diatoms die each year, float to the bottom of the lake, and establish these thin rocky layers that are like growth rings in a tree. You can actually walk through time by walking your way up and down the slopes of this quarry. What we're going to show you is detailed studies of the forms of sticklebacks that are present in one section of this quarry that represents about 25,000 years of evolution that Mike's looked at in detail. At each stage, you can pull out rocks, split them from the quarry at lots of different areas to calculate which fish were present at a given time. They come in different forms, including the complete stickleback with a pelvis and a spine, reduced stickleback with a tiny rudiment like you would find in a manatee or whale, or an intermediate form where there's two bones left instead of just one. At each stage in the fossil record, you can count the fish that are seen at a similar layer across rocks in the quarry and calculate what's the percentage of the fish that are reduced or intermediate or complete. And you can do that for successive stages as you walk through time. So this is a summary of actual data from Mike's lab, calculating and counting lots of different fish and rocks. They all start out reduced. And then in this series, at about 10,000 years, a new stickleback invades the environment, replaces the previous form. This stickleback has a complete pelvis. And a very interesting thing happens over the next 10 or 15,000 years. That complete form re-evolves pelvic reduction with intermediate fossils seen along the way. Okay, we'll show you that time series again. Starts out with a population that's 100% pelvic reduced. Rapid replacement around 10,000 years, new form all with a complete pelvis, and then the re-evolution of a pelvic reduced phenotype, intermediate forms seen along the way. You can also see that in line graph form, a blue line for the reduced form that predominates in the early stage, a red line for the complete form that rapidly replaces at 10,000 years, and then the re-evolution of pelvic reduction with an intermediate form summarized by the green line shown during the time series. Okay, so it's remarkable to be able to watch evolutionary change with this level of detail. You can actually watch the morphological changes happen as centuries roll by and catch the intermediate forms as a complete stickleback evolves to a pelvic reduced state. Okay, so lots of people ask all the time, where are the fossils that are predicted by evolution? Darwin asked that question himself in 1859. Maybe because Darwin was so honest about pointing out the problems with his theory, there's still a strange urban legend or myth that transitional fossils have never been found, and that this is somehow a major problem with evolutionary theory. So after 150 years of discoveries in paleontology, that simply isn't true. Where are the key fossils? Well, for early forms of unicellular and multicellular life, the fossils are in ancient Precambrian rocks of Australia. For feathers, they're in Germany. For manatees, they're in Jamaica. For whales, they're in Pakistan and Egypt. For sticklebacks, they're in Nevada. They're actually now in many of your own backpacks for those of the students who participated in the fossil activity yesterday afternoon. So the fossil record actually provides incredibly strong support for Darwin's key idea of descent with modification. And I hope anyone who's seriously interested in this issue will look at the data as it exists in 2005, not as it existed in 1859, including all kinds of beautiful fossils, just a small segment of which we've been able to describe in the holiday lectures. So I'll stop there. It's a good time for a break, and we can take a few questions. Yeah?
Well, what's the cause of the rapid development of the stickleback?
So at the point where the complete form arises. Well, sticklebacks can migrate. There could have been an environmental change. It's not really clear where that stickleback came from, but it's very clear that the complete form arrives in the lake, and all at once, the structures now have the form of a new stickleback without intermediates along the way. So that does look like a migration or a replacement event instead of an evolutionary event. In contrast, when pelvic reduction re-evolves at the site, you clearly see the intermediates along the way. Yeah?
You keep speaking of common ancestors to support evolution, and like how many common ancestors do you think there are, or like what types were they? Like what were kind of the first ancestors of all the different types of organisms we see today?
Final paragraph of Darwin's book says, life originally breathed by the Creator into a few simple forms or one. Okay, so he thought that things must have gotten much simpler. He allowed the possibility not just of one, of maybe a few simple forms. What the fossil record actually shows is very simple forms at the beginning of the fossil record of life on Earth, bacteria, unicellular animals, unicellular organisms. And then the single-celled, simple prokaryotic organisms begin to be found also with eukaryotic organisms, then multicellular organisms, then more complex forms. Again, I think the key idea of a tree of life is that things are related by descent with modification. It's not clear if the tree has to be very broad or very narrow. It should be simpler at the beginning and more complex later. And that's exactly what the fossil record shows. Yeah.
You say you found fossils of single-celled microorganisms, and I was wondering if those helped you figure out how the origin of the Earth began, how Earth was created, if it helps explain it.
So I think it's also important to remember that Darwin's theory is a theory of how life changes, right? So there aren't whole chapters of Darwin's book that explain the creation, where did the universe come from? That's not what Darwin's book is about. Darwin's book is about how life is changed and how organisms are related by descent with modification. I think that's a frequent confusion that you see a lot in debates about religion and evolution, that somehow evolution proves that the universe was created by some random process. Evolution describes how life